Graybeard Wheeling, back at it again. So, working on this LJ that I picked up for the wife and kids. Waiting on some parts, but just knocking out some basic maintenance items. Today, oil change. So, I already did the valve cover gasket, the rear main seal, oil pan, and oil pan gasket. So those were replaced, which means oil pan is dry-ish. It's gonna drop, drip, drip, drip for weeks and weeks, but there's nothing really in that pan. So today I'm gonna pull this old oil filter off, put a new one on, and get some oil in this engine so it's not sitting dry. I did, knowing that it was going to sit for a little bit, put some heavy oil on the bearing surface of the rear main cap. Just again, don't want a dry startup. I cleaned it up real good while I was working on putting the new seal in. So before I put the cap back in, I put a little bit of heavy oil on that bearing, as well as on the inside of the seal surface, just so when it starts rotating, it doesn't just grab that crankshaft and spin out of position. So another thing I'm going to do, and I do this on every oil change, I'm going to put some oil in the filter. I'm going to wet the seal so it doesn't tear. I'm going to make sure the old seal doesn't get stuck left on the block, and I'm going to put some oil in the oil filters that when this thing starts up the first time, the oil pump doesn't have to fill that filter before it can pump through to the rest of the engine. So with that, we got to get that guy out. Oil filter is the orange and black thing in there. So let's see if I can just get it off with my hand. I've already got an oil pan down there. That's gonna be a no. I'm gonna put this down for a minute and go grab a filter wrench. Okay, oil filter wrench. Just a piece of spring steel pinned in two places. When you leverage it, it gets tighter. Should only ever be used for removing a filter, not for tightening one. Hand tight, guys. Okay. Getting it to tighten up. Can be a little bit challenging, depending on if it's too big for the application. This one was probably a touch big. But once we got it the first turn, it was free. So a couple things. It's gonna drip. It just is. So make sure you have your catch can ready. Wipe the surrounding block down when you're done getting it out of there. Be responsible. Let's use motor oil. It's not good for the environment. Just like my face is probably not good for extreme close-ups. righty tighty, lefty loosey. Once you get it to start coming off, it should come off very smoothly. So here's what we were talking about before about the seal. This gasket here, this sealing surface right here, that needs to be on this oil filter. If not, you can bet it is either, if I can get a good view of the block, it's either still down there somewhere. There we go. Right smack in the middle there is where this screws on. And you can see that brighter metal surface is the mating surface for the seal. So if the filter seal is not on the actual filter, make sure it's not still stuck there, because it's either going to be there or in the pan on the ground. They don't come off that often. I can honestly say I've never had one come off on me, but I've had enough people report that they had it happen that it's well worth checking. And the problem is, if you have two seals on there, the old one and the new one, it's probably not going to actually get a good surface seal, and you're going to be shooting oil out the oil filter. It's going to make a mess. You're going to run low on oil fast. Problems with the engine. You're going to lose pressure. So the top end of the engine is probably not going to get the proper amount of oil pressure. So things like cam bearings and rockers, that kind of stuff will suffer. So just all in all, bad stuff. Just easy thing, check. Is that seal there? If yes, great, move on. If no, find it. Don't move on till you find it. All right, we get set up for the next step. I'm going to clean up the engine block a little bit, get the drips, just get a clean surface. Back in a bit. And the oil change continues. So we got our oil filter ready to go. I wiped off the surface a little bit. There was just some dust from the packing material. We go ahead and get some oil in there. It's gonna burp. It's gonna slosh a little bit. I'm not filling it all the way up. We got a horizontal mount filter here, so I can't fill the whole thing up, but I just want to get some in there. And then with a clean fingertip, reasonably clean fingertip, I'm gonna dip my finger in that oil and wet that surface, that seal down. Just get it good and wet. All right, that's it. Real easy. Now, I could have done a better job of not making a mess in there. Usually I do, but I'm also usually not looking through a camera. So, you don't need to put it all up on the outside like that. Get more of it on the inside. It'll stay without spilling so much. I do have a blue towel sitting there to catch what drips, and then I'll just pull that towel out of there. But now it's a simple matter of feeding your arm through there and getting to where you can get it on there. Some cars it's easier to do it from the bottom, some it's easier to do it from the top, some it's just not easy, period. My wife's old 2012 Liberty, absolute nightmare. Horizontal mount filter on the front of the engine, and with the skid plate package and whatever else, that was just a nightmare to get an arm in for me. If you got real narrow fingers, real small hands, not so bad. Me, I could barely get my hand in there. I'm not Andre the Giant proportions, but I'm not a small guy. So I'm just gonna put the camera down for a second here. Try to work my way in here. Yeah, it's gonna take a little wiggling to get it started. And you're gonna want dry hands. But just finger tight, hand tight. Not oil filter tight or oil filter wrench tight. Not as strong as you can possibly turn it. Snug it in. That's it. It's on there. It's tight. So why are we not putting the oil filter wrench on that and just going gung-ho McGill Gorilla on it and tightening it till it can't stop? Easy. It's sheet metal. It's weak. It's easy to damage. That threaded section is the strongest part of the entire filter. It's the most reinforced. You tighten that down too hard, it's going to pull that section and pull it and pull it. It's going to actually suck that part of the filter up, and it's going to cause problems with these oil passageways, and it's going to affect the way the filter works. So don't do it. Very simple. Get it on there, get it tight enough that it won't just wiggle loose, and be done. Oh, and one of the nice things with the Fram filters, they give you a little tag to write down mileage, date, vehicle. This one is not currently running. Battery's disconnected because of all the other work I got to do. So I will just tear that tag off and leave it on top of the dash. I may not fill that tag out because honestly I've been keeping my notes in Microsoft OneNote now. I do work in IT, but that'll be my reminder to get an accurate measurement of the mileage. I should honestly have it on the paperwork, since this essentially only has like 30 miles on it from point of purchase. But it doesn't hurt to double check the numbers and write them down. That way I can start my maintenance logs on this thing with good information. So, all right, we got old oil filter out, new oil filter in after properly prepping it. The rest is easy. Cap off, and it wants 10W30. 10W30. That's what these older engines like. I had an old big block Ford that ran on 2030 weight, 20W30, but it also had almost 400,000 miles on it, so you can bet the tolerances in that motor were nowhere near what modern engines are. These newer ones that ram with the Hemi 5.7 in it takes what, 5W20? It's like water. I'm gonna go ahead and pour 6 quarts of 10W30 on into this engine and let it drain all the way in, and that's it. Normally I would go ahead and start the engine up afterwards, get a good circulation of it, but we got other stuff going on. Oh, and that's the other thing. Normally, to start with, I would have brought the engine up to operating temperature before draining it. You want to make sure you're getting as much of the deposits out, as much of the oil running down from the top, and the hotter it is, the more it's going to run. Reduces the viscosity of it, gets it to actually drip down. With this one, again, it was sitting with the oil pan emptied, and it's been sitting for weeks, so doesn't really matter. Not a big deal. This is actually going to be probably a short oil change anyway. I'm going to see how it runs, and depending on if I hear any lifter noise or anything, I may just go ahead and dump some seafoam in there and give it a cleaning cycle, and then do another oil change immediately thereafter. You know, kind of sucks to throw oil away. It's expensive nowadays, but it's a lot more expensive to do a full-blown engine rebuild. And there's just no telling what's on the inside of this thing, considering how much crud's on the outside. Like, it's covered. This is after already hitting it with engine degreaser and a power washer. So, you know, I did get a look at it when I was doing the rear main seal, and it was obvious that it had been run with oil that should have been changed sooner and wasn't. I think it just got to a point where this thing was basically not getting oil changes, rather it was just getting replenishment as it was leaking oil. It was probably just putting a quart in every 2 weeks and calling that the oil change. Maybe I'm wrong, it's possible, but there's enough other questionable things going on in this engine compartment that I feel kind of safe making assumptions the worst, rather than giving the benefit of the doubt on anything. So, all right, here we go. Putting some oil in and on to the next thing.